Thanks, Steve. So I work at Fender, the guitar company. Some people have talked to me so far this time, and everyone thinks I'm saying vendor. No, Fender with an F. We make the musical instruments. It's great to be here. Great to be back. It's been, I think, 6 or 7 years since my last GIS, so a lot of fun to be back. And I'm going to talk to you guys about some stuff that you already have in your platform. I know every year we get this really great update that's like, hey, you can use AI for literally anything. It'll run your whole program, or dynamic content on delivery. Versado Mobile Link, I still want a contract any day now. But this year, I'm going to talk to you about how to get the most out of what you already have. There's so many optimizations that exist in your programs today that you are probably not taking advantage of. And I actually was going to start this with just a whole talk about the welcome email. I was going to do 20 minutes on the welcome email, and I talked myself out of it, but we'll see. So we'll start here. Pretty much everybody probably is capturing email on their homepage, or the second page as is best practice now. But what do you really know about a visitor at this point that you're capturing that email? Pretty much nothing in most cases, right? Like you maybe are tracking them through GA, so you know what their location is. Hopefully you know some additional information prior to this, but probably not too much. At Fender, people go through so many arbitrary paths. They'll come in looking at Albert Hammond Jr., he's the lead guitarist for the Strokes. We just did a signature model with him. They'll look at his guitar, they'll look at other strats, they'll look at Fender Play, which is our Learn to Play subscription service for learning to play guitar, bass, and ukulele. And then they might choose to learn to play a song by the Strokes. And that whole path happens after you trigger the welcome email from that subscription modal. Maybe someone's converted. Maybe they've already created an account. Maybe they started a free trial in the case of our subscription business, or maybe they actually made a purchase, like in our e-com business. So many things happen before they leave the site that first time. How would your welcome email change if you knew about a purchase or what product category someone was interested in? Had they created an account? What platform they were actually on? You probably already know most of this data. It actually probably flows through into your ESP, but if you're triggering your welcome email when someone enters their email address into that form, or when someone creates an account before they actually check out, as is the case with probably many of our businesses, you're really missing an opportunity. The welcome email is just another email that's meant to what? Drive traffic and transactions. And if you're firing a welcome email when someone is still on your site, what good does it do you? So think about how you can personalize that experience, leveraging what you've already learned. For Fender Play, we were triggering that account email at the moment of sign-up, which happened right before someone decided whether or not they were going to start a subscription. So we're actually firing 2 welcome emails, like you do. So in this case, we're starting to personalize this email by actually knowing if someone is starting a trial. We know if it's a monthly or an annual. And what we're getting into right now in our testing process is what instrument are they actually playing? What genre? You can be very generic about learning to play guitar, but what if they're playing bass? And so that's where we're really starting to personalize our journey. And so it all starts with the welcome email. And some of you will say, well, the welcome email sets up my program for the future. Yeah, I can do that 30 minutes after they've left your site. Some of you say, well, there's an offer that's in my submodal. Yeah, it can turn over and show it to them. So just wait a minute and send that welcome email, because you're going to get a lot out of it. So number 2, send a second welcome email. Some of you have these really long onboarding flows, we did, that have all this data in them about all the things you should try, all the ways you can use the platform. We turned our first onboarding email into a message from one of our instructors. And we saw real results. It actually had the same open rate as our normal welcome email. 7% of people actually respond to this email to ask Matt questions. Matt's the most common instructor that people are going to see in Fender Play. They talk about how they haven't learned guitar in years, or they're picking up their first instrument, and they ask questions, and we get to build a real customer relationship with them really early. We actually have seen a 12% increase in people actually taking lessons through their first 2 weeks by just adding this one email. Text-based emails aren't a new thing, but how can you leverage them for your brand? I've seen some good examples from Dollar Shave Club and other folks that use it as sort of this customer service reach out. How can we help you with your membership? How can we help you complete that first order, but in a gentler way? So with that, design with a result in mind. So this is the Parallel Universe series. How many people in here play guitar? A handful, mostly in the back. All right. So we released limited edition models across the course of a year, and Parallel Universe was our creation of sort of, if we reimagined the guitars we were already making, pairing different components of them together. This one is the Meteora. And in all of our Parallel Universe emails, we launched them with an email that looked like this. Some interesting photography at the top, shot at Joshua Tree, and then a whole lot of copy telling you about every little detail about that item. All that detail exists on the site. You don't need to read it in email. So like, what was our goal here? To tell them all the things that they were already going to learn if they clicked through? It's probably not necessary for them to shop the email. So we dropped it down to this. Just cut out the entire bottom section, and we saw a 20% lift in click-through rate, and actually higher conversion as well. But this still wasn't actually doing it for us, because for those of you that have played guitar or a musical instrument, you know it's a very personal thing. For us, it's very much this authentic journey of discovering sort of who you are as a creator. And so this didn't quite get the job done for us. And so we looked at all the content we had created, and we actually didn't realize that we had shot 2 really amazing videos in 4K, which is perfectly fine to pull stuff into email. We had some really great photo shoots around these items. So we actually turned to a video that we had. Does anybody know who this is? This is Jim Root. He's the lead guitar player for Slipknot. And we did a whole series of videos with our Parallel Universe series where we actually blindfolded famous guitar players and put the guitar in their hands and had them play it blindfolded. Feel it out, trying to determine what they thought it was. Really amazing content that we then pulled forward into email. And so instead of doing this, we turned it into that. We tell more of our brand story. We have such an iconic brand. How could we not leverage it? And so now we finally are starting to, and we're seeing the results. And this isn't an integration. It's the content we were already creating. It's just got to think about the little things that you can do. So sometimes you just got to test the simple things. There's probably a long list of things that you want to test. Some of them are probably really complicated. AI subject lines, the dynamic content where there's 500 variations where you can't QA them all. We have the same problem. We had a worse problem at Groupon, actually, because of every division in the US. But one of the big things that we actually saw lifted at Groupon, this is a Groupon goods email. It actually hasn't changed much in the last 5 years. When I started, it looked pretty much identical to this. We did little things like crossing out pricing, adding the fact that there had been a bunch of them purchased. But actually the biggest change to this email was when we just kept adding deals. Groupon's a deal-based site. It only had 9 deals in it, and we got a 2% lift from adding 2 more deals every time we added 2 more deals, up until it clipped in Gmail. Seemed like a simple thing, but gave us a big lift. This is my favorite simple thing that always gives everyone a lift in checkout, is adding that you have a secure checkout. It doesn't matter if you're a big brand or a little brand. For some reason, adding that McAfee Secure button to when you start your checkout provides pretty much everyone lift. So if you haven't done that yet, I recommend you try it because it's always works. I recommend that when you think about what you're going to test, especially the simple things, you make a list of all of the things that you could possibly want to test. Look at all your competitors. Look at everything that you've ever wanted to do in your email program. But evaluate not based on best practice or even some of the things that you hear today. Evaluate on how it actually impacts your customer journey or their experience. That security one's a great point of that, right? It makes them feel more secure in that transaction. That's one that has become best practice, but how can you make someone feel better about your brand, how they're engaging with you and your platform? There's so many things that you can do if you just think about it in the course of that journey. Some bonus tips: make sure that you're testing with enough volume to actually learn the things that you want to learn. There's too many people that test with 1% of their audience or 5% of their audience. If we did that, we would not take enough transactions to be statistically significant in our lifetime. So make sure that you're testing with enough volume. And then save your testing for non-critical dates. I know some people talk about how they test subject lines on Black Friday. Just create a second Black Friday. And that sounds silly, I know, but at Groupon we did one in July, which we didn't invent. I think Target invented Black Friday in July. But then we did a preview in October and another preview in November to give us space for the actual November. And then we did it again in December and again in March. So Groupon actually does 5 Black Fridays a year now, but it allows them to learn for the biggest one. Finally, steal these ideas. All of the ideas that you see in all of these presentations, just take them. Steal from every single person in this room. I'm sure that they'd be happy to have you take them. That's where a lot of great programs begin, and they never end, right? You just continually see all this new stuff. Leverage it into your own program. That Meteor email, it started with this Converse email. We thought this was a really great crossover. So the way the images flow, trying to reduce down our copy and get to the feeling of what it was. And we actually did our first gift the other day. We stole it from Yeti. No shame. You gotta steal from the stuff that you think is great, because that's how you're gonna make your program better. This was an easy one. In our mod shop, you can combine colors, pull them all the way through. So, and it just happens to be that they synced up because that's the image that we shared with our design team to create our own. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that stuff helps.
Brian, we have time for questions of Brian?
You should.
Yep. Oops. Over here.
Susan Humana.
Yeah.
So I work for a health insurance company. A lot of our content is not nearly as sexy as yours is. I was just looking at, how you morphed from your original Fender into the beautiful content piece with your, let's say, influencer. A lot of times when we're working with influencers at Humana, the brand kind of owns that relationship and they kind of dictate the content. I'm wondering, how is it that you kind of work with your brand team, because sometimes email is, separate or an afterthought when it comes to a lot of the brand promotions, to kind of showcase and tell them, like, this is what works in email, this is how it should be formatted, or, the content could be changed within email. Just that relationship with brand, if you could kind of explain that to me and how you all work together.
Sure. So we have a handful of creative directors in-house that handle our various campaigns. So we launch roughly, call it 40-ish items a year. Some of them are new lines, some of them are line variations, some of them are smaller. And our creative directors basically get a through line. So we just launched the American Performer a couple weeks ago, and it's a new Made in America line. And there's a creative director that's assigned to that. They go and they shoot all this content, usually videos, depending on what level it is for us, and then we weave that through into sort of all of the different things. We have in-store books, because the other thing to know about Fender is we don't sell most of our own stuff. Guitar Center, Sweetwater, they sell most of our guitars. So we are producing a ton of assets for actual in-store use. We are producing a ton of digital assets as well. And so these campaigns are being created sort of from a holistic brand perspective that we then weave through into the rest of what we do. So you're right, we do have very sexy imagery. It helps to be Fender. It helps to have the artist relationships that we have. But we do sort of start the campaign with all things in mind, which allows us to really pull a bunch of stuff through. And also the other thing too is, like I mentioned, that email is really, that Meteor email is really largely pulled from a video that we shot. There's actually only one still that was taken for that. It's all pulled from a 4K video. So like 5-6 years ago, we were all shooting in 1080 still. And that stuff was harder to translate into email, especially if you need to blow things up and resize them. Now in the age of everyone shooting 4K, it's a lot easier to pull assets from the videos that you're creating as well.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you're reconciling the various marketing goals, from driving store traffic, driving direct conversions, and this customer relationship, and how you are valuing and weighing the value of pure customer relationship emails versus the other opportunities and the other priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an interesting one because, like I said, we don't sell most of our own guitars. So I've had a bunch of conversations since I've been here where people think, oh, Fender, you guys have all this data on your users. Like, no, our users are playing a physical instrument in their homes. They're not plugged in always. Like we don't actually sell most of them ourselves. So we're losing a lot of content in that space, or a lot of data in that space. And that's something that we're working on. LTV is sort of something that you're always working on, right? And so when it comes to our marketing goals, we have a whole series of things that we are beholden to across the course of the year. One of them is launching new products. One of them is our e-com business. And one of them is Fender Play, which is a very large portion of what we focus on right now, which is driving sort of membership around that Learn to Play guitar, bass, and ukulele subscription service. And so as we think about what our through line is, what we're trying to do a better job of is identifying, hey, this person's an electric guitar player based on what model we know that they're using because of registration or because of purchase through us. They probably belong in, they're probably learning to play. Or because of this purchase, they're probably not learning to play and we should not show that message to them. So we're trying to get better about those components of it. I think when I think of marketing goals as a whole, it is a bit odd because we do have so many retail relationships where that's driving the actual final conversion point. And so for us, weaving that brand story and making the connections of, hey, this is the content that people are looking for, especially from a brand like ours, where it's like, hey, here's the new guitar, here's all the facets of that new guitar, and sort of telling that whole story to get someone through to that final conversion point. That's where we really find our wins, working towards the overall marketing goals of course, revenue and traffic and everything.
One back here.
Hi, my name is Lucy. I'm with AutoList, and you talked about in your welcome email kind of how you leverage the data around what the user is doing in terms of activity on your site right after they sign up. I was kind of curious how you handle the flip side of that, where users maybe come to the site and don't really engage and do much. What are you sending them? What type of content do you decide to send to them?
Yeah, totally. So we have a bunch of stuff that's sort of in flight now and that we're actively testing, and it's one where when you don't know anything about someone who comes to Fender.com, you sort of assume they're an intermediate guitar player. And so we have this fallback for our brand that's sort of like, what is the core of what we do? What's the largest, like, by volume of what we do? We serve up those extra messages that we are trying to serve, such as Fender Play. But we always make sure that we have a fallback that's consistent with the brand as a whole. So for the person that does come, enter their email address and bounce, it's more of the entrance to the full brand picture. As they get deeper down the funnel, especially through Play, we can leverage more information to get there. Yeah, I think that answers that question.
Is the D2C e-com Play relatively recent for Fender?
It is, yeah. So
yeah.
actually,
and
Fender,
I'm curious about how that, I think when we talked about it, that's one of the things that you're struggling with, is that now you've got different set of priorities. You've got different audiences that may be going to your trusted retail partners or maybe coming direct to you. How does that impact the strategy?
Yeah, so what's really interesting about Fender is it's almost a 75-year-old company that digital is like 2 or 3 years old at, really. So D2C is very, very new for us. I think we're 3 years into e-com, maybe. And so it is a really interesting balance when it comes to our retailers, because when we initially said we were going to sell direct to consumer, they were really not happy about it. We're the first in the musical instrument space to do that. So we do have these sort of ever-shifting priorities, and I think we still maintain we need to launch the line, right? We need to launch the new series, we need to launch the limited edition stuff. We have the components of it now that become more transactional, and we've gone back and forth on how transactional it should be. And then Fender Play is a little over a year old, and that's a big priority for us as we help grow the overall guitar market, because a fun fact about guitar is that it has a huge retention problem. Roughly 90% of people that start playing guitar for the first time will put it down within 6 months. So like guitar itself as an instrument has a retention problem. And so part of our solve for that is Fender Play, because if you learn to play, you get, like, you'll develop that lifelong relationship. You'll buy more guitars, and sure, they might be Gibson, like might be Epiphone, doesn't matter. Because most people who have 10 guitars don't have 10 Fenders, they have 7 Fenders and other stuff. But it is one where once you develop that lifelong relationship with guitar, it does make a huge impact on LTV. And so that's part of what Fender Play is to us, and that's why it is such a huge focus, is to actually get people to learn and develop that relationship with. So it sometimes takes an outsized priority against e-com or against the launch products and stuff, and we really have to find the right balance through. And I think that's something that we'll be working on for a very, very long time.
And I imagine that's data that they'd go back to the retailers and say, we now have a better and deeper understanding of a set of behaviors, not just path to purchase, but path to use afterwards, that we can now use to inform our promotions for you.
It's an interesting space, because if you look at Sweetwater and Reverb, they're purely digital MI, and then you have all the mom and pop shops where their inventory is literally on paper. They may or may not actually have a computer in their store, and so we've got these huge wide ends of this data where it's like, hey, so we have these meetings and we go, hey, here's what we're seeing. Like, we're seeing that we are driving more traffic to you, and we can see that based on the engagement with Shop Local on our site. We know that we're driving people to purchase more because we see that the behavior in our Fender Play subscribers is elevated. above and beyond people that we know are only doing YouTube videos or guitar tricks or another platform. So it's been an interesting sort of ongoing conversation that is ever evolving with our retailers.
Brian Schmidt, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me ask the question.